Recently, we initiated a series of studies which culminated in a speech by Colonel Pearson not too long ago, in which he spoke of the Mediterranean, the Alaska being and the Arctic being the Mediterranean of the North.
Well, all of us who have followed the history of Alaska and remembered its utter defenselessness on the eve of World War II have always harked back as our great authority to Billy Mitchell, who, as you know, started as an Army officer, Signal Corps officer. He was the fellow that strung the lines along the old trail from Eagle to the coast. And although he later attained distinction as an Air Force officer, he really got his start in the Army. And you may recall that in his last public appearance in 1935 before the Armed Services Committee of the House, he said, "He who holds Alaska holds the world." Well, I think it should be made the Gibraltar of the Western world. It certainly could be and should be the bulwark of the North American continent.
Alaska has a long history of interaction with the military, and more specifically, the United States Army. During the 1700s and 1800s, the first European explorers sailed into the waters of Alaska. Captain James Cook of the British Navy and Captain Vitus Bering of the Russian Navy were some of the first Western explorers to interact with Alaska's natives and seek out commercial and strategic gain from the territory. When the United States purchased the territory of Alaska from Russia in 1868, it was put under the administration of the Army. The purchase is still celebrated annually at the original ceremonial site in Sitka. The territory of Alaska was finally transferred to local civilian government control under the Organic Act of 1884. The Army spearheaded the exploration and mapping of the territory throughout the late 1800s. Under the direction of Brigadier General Adolphus W. Greely, the Signal Corps constructed the Washington-Alaska Military Cable and Telegraph System, or WAMCATS, which was completed in 1903. The line stretched from Seattle to southeast Alaska, providing a direct communications link to the lower 48 states. This, coupled with the Klondike Gold Rush of 1897, helped establish infrastructure to support an increased population as thousands poured into the territory, which continued into the early 1900s. In 1935, a military visionary, Brigadier General Billy Mitchell, who had worked earlier in establishing WAMCATS, foresaw that with the advent of aviation, Alaska would become the most strategic place on Earth due to its proximity to Asia and its potential over the North Pole route to Europe. With the rising of world tensions and hostilities in Asia in the late 1930s, officials in Washington, D.C. saw Alaska as a strategic vulnerability to the North American continent. This resulted in a massive transformation of Alaska's defensive and transportation systems. The Army initiated an accelerated construction program of military defenses and posts throughout the territory, such as Fort Richardson, named after Brigadier General Wilds P. Richardson, an early Army explorer; Fort Greely, after Brigadier General Adolphus W. Greely; and Ladd Field, later named Fort Wainwright, after General Jonathan Wainwright, the famed Army commander who fought at Corregidor. The development of Alaska's infrastructure continued throughout World War II, including the construction of the Alaska-Canadian Highway, or ALCAN, in 1942, as an overland route to move troops and supplies from the lower 48 states to Alaska. In an agreement with the Canadian government, thousands of United States Army Corps of Engineers built the 1,420-mile road in less than 8 months. In 1942, just 6 months after the bombing of Pearl Harbor and the United States' entry into World War II, Japan again attacked the United States territory in a little-known but psychologically significant aerial bombardment of Dutch Harbor, Alaska. This was followed with the invasion and occupation of 2 of the westernmost Aleutian Islands, Attu and Kiska. marking the first time that American territory had been occupied by another country since the War of 1812. Japan's purpose was to secure the northern perimeter of the Pacific Ocean and divert American naval assets away from the planned invasion of Midway Island. The Aleutian campaign lasted about a year and ended in the retaking of both islands, but with large loss of troops and equipment, mostly due to the harsh Alaskan weather conditions. In the fight for Attu Island, 549 Americans were killed in battle, but more than 2,100 suffered non-battle injuries, such as trench foot and exposure. During World War II, Alaska's strategic location was instrumental in the United States providing war aid to the Soviet Union's fight against Nazi Germany. Through the Lend-Lease program, the U.S. transferred nearly 8,000 planes to the Soviet Union from Ladd Army Field near Fairbanks. The aircraft were staged and prepared for use by Soviet forces, including translating instrument panels to the Russian language. Soviet troops were trained as operators, and these pilots flew the planes from Alaska to the Soviet Union. Shortly after World War II, in January of 1947, the Alaska Command, or ALCOM, was established. Its primary responsibility was to oversee all military forces in the territory. The Army also formed a new headquarters under ALCOM, called U.S. Army Alaska, or USARAL, which was responsible for the command, control, and logistical support of all U.S. Army forces in Alaska. Military missions assigned to USARAL included ground and air defense of Alaska, with priority to protect the Anchorage and Fairbanks areas. Using lessons learned from the Aleutian campaign, Army forces were instrumental in the development of cold weather and mountain warfare doctrine, establishing the Army School, dedicated to training soldiers how to survive and conduct combat operations in both Arctic and mountainous conditions. That school remains in Alaska today as the Northern Warfare Training Center. Also during this time, several new units were established under USARAL, to include the 1st Helicopter Unit, the 80th Light Helicopter Transportation Company, and Alaska's 1st Combat Parachute Company, Company F, 1st Battle Group, 23rd Infantry. In December 1959, Battery B, 2nd Missile Battalion, 562nd Artillery, fired the first Nike Hercules missile from Site Summit, a prominent landmark overlooking Anchorage. The site serves as a testimony of the Army's significance to the nation's defense against strategic air attack during the Cold War. A total of 6 Nike Hercules air defense missile battalions were activated in Alaska until they were decommissioned in July of 1979. In December of 1974, USARAL was deactivated, and the 172nd Infantry Brigade assumed command and control of Alaskan-based Army forces until 1986, when the 6th Infantry Division Light was activated in Alaska. In 1989, the 6th Division became aligned under the command of the U.S. Army Pacific, or USAPAC, which brought a new focus for Army forces in Alaska, promoting peace and security within the Pacific area, which included conducting joint and multilateral exercises in Japan, Thailand, and the Philippines. The 6th ID deactivated in 1994, when once again headquarters U.S. Army Alaska was established and assumed command and control of Alaskan-based forces, this time known as USARAC. The current-day USARAC has command and control over a wide array of forces, to include 425 Airborne Brigade, 125 Stryker Brigade, a brigade-sized aviation task force, Task Force 49, and separate theater-enabling forces, including engineer, military police, maintenance, and other support units. Yesterday, today, and tomorrow, the United States Army Alaska continues its mission, deploying personnel and equipment to wherever needed and providing state-of-the-art warfighter support. With its unique strategic location and unmatched training space, U.S. Army Alaska is prepared to meet the challenges of today and the future. Arctic warriors, Arctic tough. Our history, Alaska's history. Indelibly linked, our future is Alaska's future.